Hi guys, welcome back to Exploring Bricks. Yesterday we got this book in the mail and I could not be more excited about it. This is the LEGO Space book. It covers the whole range from 1978 to 1992 and we've barely had it 24 hours and I've already browsed through most of it. This is a hardback. This is a really nice book. It's a coffee table book, and I think that even if you're not interested in LEGO in general or LEGO Space specifically, I think you might be interested in this one anyway. At least if you were growing up in the 80s, because this brings back so many memories. The book is written by Tim Johnson and it's 200 pages long and it retails for $49.99 US. I think it's about 45 euros here in Europe. It's been out for a couple of weeks in the US, at least I think so, but it's brand new here in Europe. We got it the first day once it was available to us. We ordered it off of Amazon, but I think you can order it off of any book vendor online. The book in itself, it is divided into 5 different chapters. The first chapter briefly covers the history of LEGO Space and why it became LEGO Space. And then the following 3 chapters are covering the sets that were produced during this era. And the last chapter is about what happened after the LEGO Space range was discontinued. The first chapter is about the history of the range and why it came to be. So you get a brief history of the LEGO company and specifically what happened during the 60s and the 70s when space became a general interest due to the Apollo moon landing and everything else that happened in the world during that period. You also get a very nice insight in the earliest space sets that LEGO was producing. This looks nothing like the range as it came to be later in the 70s, but it was the first attempt of making LEGO in space environment. But most of all, we get to know Jens Nygaard Knudsen. He is the mastermind behind the LEGO Space range. And when you browse through this book, you realize that it's an homage to Jens. He sadly passed away not too long ago, but the work he has done is really highlighted in this book, and it also emphasizes just the impact that he had on a whole generation. So apart from explaining why and how the range came to be and introducing sets like this one, set 367, the moon landing, it also covers other aspects that were relevant to the space range. For instance, the prototypes of the minifigures. It's kind of funny to see how the earliest prototypes was red and white. Since this was done in the late 70s, must have something to do with the Cold War between Soviet Union and USA. The first chapter that's about the actual range is covering the classic LEGO Space part of that range, and it's from the time period of 1978 to 1987. So it's a fairly big part of the time that LEGO Space was produced. You can already right off the bat see that the color scheme was quite similar on the sets early on. A lot of gray pieces, and the closer you get to 1987, the more color are introduced into the sets. Every chapter is presented in the same way. You get an overview of all the sets that were produced and you get it in a timeline. And once you move forward into the book, you eventually get to the actual sets. It's also mixed up with a lot of interviews and a lot of trivia, and there are quite a number of other images. They have adverts from different countries that were used during that specific time period, and you can also see how they presented the range from the very beginning. And once you move further into the chapter, the actual sets are presented. And they are presented with a lot of images. And one thing that I really like is at the bottom of each page, they are presented the parts that were introduced during this time period when the sets were being produced. And a lot of the parts that we take for granted today, they didn't exist. So they were invented on the fly as they produced the sets. And like I said, it is all about Jens Nygaard. This is his brainchild. The whole book is a mix between a lot of insights about the actual sets. Each set is explained as far as playability, what the thought process was behind the creation of the set, and it's mixed with a lot of nice images. The next chapter covers the time period from 1987 to 1990, so it's not a very long period, but the range changed drastically during these years. Just by looking at the sets that were produced during this time, see that something has really happened compared to the older sets. Grey is very scarce, there are barely any grey pieces left. There are some white and blue that still belongs to the original LEGO Space range, but black has been introduced big time during this time period. LEGO introduced the two new themes, Futuron and Blacktron, hence all the black sets. But it follows the same logic. You get a brief introduction to the thought process behind that specific time period, and then you get an introduction to all the sets that were produced. And you can also see that they still introduce new pieces to these sets being made as late as in the 1990s. You have to remember that back then LEGO was not what it is today. They did not have that much to choose from, and special parts were seldom seen. So this was kind of a big deal. The last chapter covered a time period from 1989 to 1992, so you can see that they are really overlapping each other. And the reason why the author has divided it into these segments are based on the introduction of new sub-themes within the LEGO Space range. And for this time period, it's Space Police, we've got M-Tron, and we got Blacktron Future Generations. For me, growing up in the 80s, I did not have a connection with LEGO when this was released, so I can't remember any of these sets. But one thing that's really striking is when you look at the sets that's produced in the early 90s and compare them to what LEGO did just like 5 years earlier. The difference is huge. Not only when it comes to special parts, color schemes, the way that they have created sets are so much more advanced than it was in the early 80s or mid 80s. The last chapter is by far the shortest chapter. It covers everything that has happened space-wise in LEGO since after 1992. And still today they are introducing new LEGO sets and new LEGO minifigures that are space related. Just the other year they had an anniversary spacecraft from the 80s range. I don't think it's an exact replica of an 80s set. I think it's a bigger version of a set that was sold in the 80s, but in the same beautiful color scheme with gray and blue pieces primarily. And even though it's a really short chapter, it covers every sub-theme that's been evolved over time after 1992. All in all, this is a really nice book if you want to feel nostalgic. And if you grew up in the 80s, at least in Sweden, LEGO was a big part of your life. And I bet you're gonna recognize some of the sets in here. So I think it's a really nice book. I think the author's done a great job capturing the whole range. Also the way it's presented with the mix of sets, trivia, facts, interviews. The only thing that's on the downside about this book is the price. It is quite pricey for being a book with just 200 pages. But then again, the quality of the book is really nice. I could have paid more. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section. Will you pay that much for this book, or have you actually bought it? Let us know what you think about it. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next vlog. Bye bye.